Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
Balanced uncutter worthy, Jeff.
Cool. So I'm dropping my English accent for this one. Hope you all don't mind. This is How the Sword Saved Me. We're going to be talking about basically how our joining martial arts, specifically sword fighting variety, has helped us and basically saved us in our lives. So you're going to be hearing a lot of like personal stories. We're going to be talking about some like mental health and relationships and physical things, and it's going to be a little bit of story time. So everyone that we have here today, my name is Kristen Brumley. I am a historical European martial artist up in Columbus, Ohio. I've been doing it for 3 years, 4 years, something like that, and love it. Longsword is my favorite. And then I am joined by 3 others here, which I would love it if you would each introduce yourselves.
Yeah, I'm Hannah Hudson. I'm a member of the USA Women's Armored Combat Team, and I live in Salt Lake City, Utah. And this is my 3rd serious year doing this sport. I kind of dabbled for a little bit, but now I'm committed. So
in a good way committed.
In a good way.
Not, in a hospital committed.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Not yet. So yeah.
I'm Amy Graham, and I am also part of the USA Broadswords, USA Women's Team. I captained the first team to ever fight from the USA, from the women, and this past year took the next team, which was awesome. And I will warn you now, I get all creepy, or not creepy, I didn't mean creepy, I meant weepy. So, it's emotional, so you guys will find out a lot of that. But yeah, I'm from Salt Lake City with Hannah, and yeah, that's also known as Badass Valkyrie, so that's pretty much all I got.
Hi, I'm Sim, and I'm a swordaholic.
Hi,
Sam.
I'm with Palmetto Knights. We're out of South Carolina. Specifically, I'm out of Greenville, South Carolina. I've been doing martial arts for a very long time. I have a black belt in Nishinryu Karate. I'm a wrestler. And I've been doing armored combat for about 13 years now. And this is my 4th anniversary of fighting in steel with steel weapons. So Dragon Con's important for me for that.
All right. So we're going to just kind of get right into it. I'm going to go ahead and start off with mine. So we kind of, I have a slight trigger warning in this one, in that I will be talking about abuse in relationships a little bit. So nothing too deep or anything, but in case, so you know. So anyway, when I started doing sword fighting, I was driving an hour and a half to get to the place. Kind of backing up a little bit, I was living in Morgantown, West Virginia, in case anybody likes the Mountaineers. Woo! Go Mountaineers! And I was in a relationship that was in fact a very bad one. There was a lot of abuse that kind of went on there, and I was going through depression, going through a lot of my quarter-life crisis. That's totally a thing that totally exists, right?
Yes.
Yeah, totally does. Totally a thing. And had discovered that I actually did have depression and was going through a lot of things. And so my self-esteem was pretty much like shit. I didn't really think well of myself at all. I kind of sat on a couch most of the time. It was pretty awful. And I was in this relationship because I didn't really know how to get out of it, basically, or rather I didn't really feel like I was kind of worth necessarily, like I was so lucky that he was there, even though it was clear that he was not that nice of a person. So this was kind of an awful cycle that was for a while, until I heard this thing. I was really into Game of Thrones, still am. Probably most of you are too. I had heard from meetup.com that there was this group starting up in Pittsburgh that like just fresh. They were gonna start this thing called HEMA, Historical European Martial Arts. I'd never heard of it ever in my entire life. But the whole thing behind it was that they were going to teach swords to people and that you could become a swords person. And I had heard like one time that that was a thing. Like obviously it's a thing, right? But like how often do you run into somebody who studies the sword and actually fights with it? Not that often. So I was like, oh, that's so, so cool. At least somebody in West Virginia, I didn't hear much of that. So I was like, all right, cool. I'm gonna go check it out. And so I drove up an hour and a half to get to this very first, I didn't know anybody there. And I had no idea where I was going. But I show up and there's these two guys. And one is like a gorilla-shaped person. He's huge. His muscles, like his upper body's like bigger than his like the bottom, and but really like this is him. This is like, oh, what's that one cartoon guy with like the sunglasses and like the that dude. This is what he looks like.
Oh my God, y'all are geeks.
I love it. And I walk in, and there he is. And then there's also like this other guy there who they had never taught anybody how to do sword fighting at all, ever in their entire lives. And they were like, well, we're going to start a club. And I was like, cool, I'm here too. And we ended up having this whole amazing day where they were trying to figure out how to teach me things that they didn't quite know either. And we were all like, this is awesome. This is so cool. And I had never, it was like the first day that I was like, wow, things are fun in life. And this is cool. And I'm doing cool things. And I remember going back home that day and saying to my boyfriend, I was like, man, I did this sword fighting thing, and I was so excited telling him about the longsword and all these, and he's like, well, that's dumb, and you're gonna get hurt and all these things. But I remember sitting there thinking like, but I felt like Brianna Tarf. And I was like, all right, I'm gonna keep going. And so what ended up happening was because I kept going, and I ended up making these friends, and more people started coming to sword fighting practice, and I was kind of like part of the guys group, and in that they were all guys, I was the only girl. But it ended up happening that by going to this group, by kind of also taking myself out of where I was and going to a completely new environment and a whole new thing, I was able to gain a lot more confidence. If things from, we would be sword fighting, like specifically we're talking about sword fighting here. Part of martial arts is like in learning, there's a lot of getting beat down. Constantly, where we'd be sparring, and Josh, Gorilla Guy, would like smack me down, and I'd be on the ground, and it would be like a huge grin on my face. I'm like, this is awesome! That doesn't make any sense, but there is such a thrill in getting back up that it translates, at least for me, into real life, where it was, well, I can get beat up by an actual dude who has like the sword and actually be on the ground and totally get back up. And I should be able to do that in like real life and other things too. So I ended up getting out of the relationship. I ended up moving out of West Virginia, started my own company. I'm doing like fantastically now. I have a great relationship now. I just got engaged, so that was cool. And really all of it was because I started sword fighting. So I know we have limited time and we have other really great stories, so we're actually going to move on to Sem. He's going to talk a little bit too about his experience.
All right, so some of the challenges that martial arts has helped me with. When I was a young man, I didn't have a father around, and so I didn't really have that good of an example of how to be a guy, how to be a good dude, and about halfway through my formative years, I got kind of abandoned by my other parent. So it was very tough for me, and I turned to martial arts, unarmed martial arts, as a way of self-reliance. Because I felt at that time, I couldn't rely on anybody else because just keep getting let down and left behind. So I started studying martial arts so that I could take care of myself. And that improved. That helped me a lot. As I picked up more and more along there, my family came back together. They would come back together and do some more stuff around martial arts. Come and watch me at wrestling matches and tournaments and things like that. And that helped a lot, but my dad wasn't there. And all of that added together to make some serious temper issues for me. And that's not a joke about the hardness of the armor. I just had a bad temper. I've got great temper now, nothing cracks or breaks or anything like that. And the anger issues that I dealt with were made so much better through martial arts. But even then, coming around to my adult years, I still needed more to go. And around that time is when I discovered some folks in my area. They were doing the SCA, and the SCA is what led me into this. In fact, the guy that I met at practice is here this week, and we're going to be fighting in the tournament tomorrow. And I look up to him greatly. He gave me an example of what someone could be who could control their temper, who could act appropriately, and knightly. And I began to read about knightly virtues, and particularly a book called The Knight's Own Book of Chivalry by Geoffrey de Charny. It's written in the 15th century, and it has a lot of good stuff to say even now about the virtues of people and what they do and how virtuous they are based on what you do. It was all based around knightly combat, knightly things, and it was all true by a man who lived it 500 years ago. Going through that, I had another stumble. It was going to one of my first tournaments, and a car broke down. My dad and I didn't have a great relationship, but he was a great mechanic, so I called him up and asked him for help. He showed up with a tow truck, and he said, "What are you doing 3 hours from home? What are you doing all the way up here in this horrible car?" And I said, "Well, I was up here for a sword fighting tournament." And he went on about how stupid that was. And I just kind of took it. And I took it because I had learned that I was stronger through martial arts, particularly through seeing people that were good examples and being like them, wanting to be like them. And all that story wraps out to good stuff, because eventually we were fighting in my area with that same guy who started training me. And I invited my dad to come out. And I was out there fighting, doing well, being who I wanted to be. And my dad saw that, and he said, "I see why this matters so much to you." And we see each other several times a week now. We're great friends. I don't know that I could have been ready to do that if it weren't not only for martial arts, but for the idea of knightly virtues, for the idea of being a better person through combat, through testing yourself, trying yourself, and making yourself better, not only physically, but mentally. So I probably wouldn't be the person I am today, that I'm proud of, and I hope my family is, if it weren't for martial arts, particularly with the sword.
So moving on to Amy.
I was adopted, and I always knew that I was adopted, so it was never a bad thing. But part of what I enjoyed about that is that meant that the people that raised me, I was a part of that. So, I was raised in a very abusive house, and I didn't know how to control. The only thing that I could control was me and my body. And I learned to shove down a lot of things and just keep it inside. And I had a lot of rage to get rid of. But I couldn't. So, Twinkies and ding dongs and candy, cakes, all that made things better. To a point where I got over 450 pounds. So, there was a point in my life where I didn't even know how much I weighed, because there wasn't a scale to pick it up. And so, 10 years ago, I had, well, almost 11 now, I had gastric bypass. I was 40. And at that point in time, I was playing, well, I started playing WoW, or I actually started in EverQuest, because I thought, I really want to be a sword fighter, and I'm 450 pounds. I'm not going to be a great sword fighter at that. So I played online, and got into that. I play a rogue, and I was a very good raid gamer. Then I moved on to WoW, and still play WoW. But I let that be my outlet. And once I got my gastric bypass, I'm like, my body started changing, and I'd always been a big girl. I mean, there was never a time in my life where I was ever considered skinny. I was always the fat girl, the epitome of the fat girl. And so when I started dropping weight, I've been fighting the SCA, and I use that term like loosely. I was basically a portable wall. So I would stand there, and people would come at me, and they knew that they couldn't get through me. And that's what my squad counted on, is she's a big wall. They're going to have to go around her because they're not going to go through her. Or when I charged a wall, that wall parted, and by brute force, pretty much. And then the leader of my household went to Poland for the first time with the first USA team, the original 29. His name's Kyle Fertel. And I work at the University of Utah, and at 8:30 in the morning, I'm watching them take the field. Something happened to me, and something woke up inside of me. And I knew that this was my destiny. I knew this is what I had to do. Turns out, women were not allowed to fight. And I'm like, this is my destiny. What do you mean I can't do this? And so I waited and waited and waited and knew I wanted to do this. Did everything I could to try to get it done in the United States. Jay Brooks and Andre Sanu started the Armory Combat League, the ACL. And they swore that they were, as soon as we had 6 women in the United States that were armored, that they would start fighting. Turns out, May 31st, 2013, the international group decided that women could fight. I started training June 1st, 2013. I haven't stopped. My body has changed. When we took the field for the first time, I was 46. I am 50. December, I'll be 51. And it's women like this that I have to compete with. And she is, how old are you?
30.
Yeah, 20 years younger than me. I try to keep up with her. And
She does.
Mostly. Mostly. But my body doesn't train that way anymore. So year by year, it gets harder and harder. And this is why I'm so emotional. Earlier in the panel was the first time I've ever said it publicly that I think this is my last year fighting. Which kills me, because this is who I've been for the past 5 years. This has been my life. And I don't know how to not be a fighter. I started out a fighter when I was a kid. And one of the interesting stories, just like Sam, my mom came and saw me for the first time fighting. We were in, I was actually fighting her. And it was interesting because my mother was like, I don't know where she gets it. She was never a fighter when we were when she was a child. I don't even understand. I don't even recognize this person as my daughter. And as much as that killed me, it also made me proud that I was not that person that had to push down everything and hide. Because I always had to make things better. I always had to take care of everybody else and push everything down. And the first time I fought, I let it all go. And that's the beauty of fighting. The style that we do is you get to release it all. And it stays on the field. And those of you who have aggression issues, anger issues, power issues, struggles that you can't let out publicly because when you'll get arrested, like me. Everybody at work is like, it is so violent. You're not this violent person. I'm like, I am. In the Avengers, when the Hulk gives you his secret, and it's like, I'm always angry. That was me. And I sat in that theater crying because I'm like, that's who I am. I always have this stuff that I have to get out. And I'm able to release it on the field without hurting people most of the time, not on purpose. And it releases it, and it doesn't build up inside of me. And I can just be like, it's done. And it just comes out of my weapon, and it releases everything into the air, and I'm free to be who I am. And I'm a very happy person now. and I don't eat my feelings anymore. Yes, I'm addicted to coffee. That's a little different story. But
Let that one slide.
we're okay with that. But it makes me a better person because I get to release everything that I have built up in the 50 years that I've been on this planet. And I will be a part of this organization till the day I die. And thankfully, the only thing that's keeping me going is that HMB has offered me a position to be an announcer. The minute that I stop fighting, they want me to do announcing for the teams and for the competitions. And I've had teams from other countries ask me to become their coach. And so I'm like, I'm not moving to the Netherlands. I'm definitely not moving to the Ukraine. But I can travel and do training sessions and things like that and help support the women's teams across the world. And that means a lot to me. So it just means that I'm not going to compete internationally hardcore because my body just can't take it. I have arthritis in both my hands. And it's sad when your heart and your mind want to do this and your body gives out. And that's where I'm at.
So, similar to, sounds like almost everyone on the panel, I grew up in a fairly abusive household, not physical, but it was abandonment. And I, much like Amy, started to eat my feelings just because that was something I could control. And it turned into a full-blown eating disorder around 15 or 16. And that coupled with a lot of anger issues from kind of being the mediator between parents and raising a younger sibling, you kind of have to control what you can control and cope with how you can cope, basically. And so I also, at the same time that I was developing an eating disorder, I was diagnosed with polycystic ovarian syndrome. And I was told that if I didn't lose weight or become healthier, I would most likely have some form of heart failure by the time I was about 40, I think, is the timeline they gave me. So I was really unhealthy. I was very overweight and just depressed. I wasn't diagnosed. I was just I kind of knew, I guess, and so I actually ended up turning to the gym first. I was a power lifter for a while, but that's, if any of you power lifted, that's not really how you lose weight. I actually put on more weight. And then I got into the Scottish Highland Games from there, but my heart really wasn't in that. It was more just a way for me to kind of compete. I wanted to compete. I've always wanted to compete, but I was the fat kid, and as I think a lot of people have felt growing up, that's kind of not a place in competitive sports for people who look a certain way. So I was like, well, screw it, I'll compete with the big girls, but I was too small to compete with the big girls very well. So I was kind of in this weird in-between phase for a while. And I went to the CrossFit Games 3 years ago, and I saw a demonstration of the USA, members of the USA team. And I remember watching these people compete, and just something just woke up, and I was on fire all of a sudden. And I turned to my husband, and I was like, I'm going to do this sport. I'm going to do this sport. And he was like, no, you're not. You're going to get hurt or be hurt somehow. And I was like, I'm going to do it. And so I ended up meeting Amy that day. And immediately I knew that this was a life-changing path for me. And a lot of that has to do with self-mastery. Because you can't compete at the level we're competing at. I mean, granted, we're not Olympic athletes by any means. We all have full-time jobs, we all have families, and so there's a lot of, I mean, we're not quite at that elite level, but for our sport we're the top. And that takes a lot of self-discipline to be able to work a full-time job and then go train for 2 hours every night, or, you know, suit up when you don't feel like suiting up and hit the Pell in your backyard by yourself. But it it really taught me how to manage my emotions. I'm still working on that, but it's definitely helped because, one, I can let my aggression out on the field, but two, I have to learn how to communicate with my teammates, and that takes a lot of discipline. And then also just the physical aspect, like I got my life back in order because I was able to control something in a positive way instead of a negative way. It became a positive outlet instead of me just sitting in front of the TV and eating or drinking. It also has given me a lot of confidence in myself. Like, I'm still not the smallest girl, but I love who I am because I'm strong and I'm capable, and when you're on the field with a weapon in your hand or when you're helping other women find their voice, there's nothing like that. And it gave me a lot of power back in my life that I felt had been kind of taken away from me at a very young age due to the neglect, basically. So that's kind of my brief history with that. So.
Sorry, I saw this. I'm like, ooh. Not be
Please
good.
don't do that.
It's like right in the line.
I've actually been looking at it a while, and it's pretty dull, but it still hurts.
Yeah. I think Hannah says it really well, though, in terms of, I think because we've picked up the sword, it's like that whole, like, being on fire and in the end, like, finding a way to love ourselves is kind of like the whole way that really, I think the message of the panel. Pretty cool.
Find your power.
Yeah, I love it.
I think that hearing y'all talk about the anger stuff as well, I've thought for a long time, I mean, my parents had different addiction issues, but I never got addicted to anything, and other than martial arts was actually a healthy thing. But anger, I think a lot of times becomes an addiction because there's an adrenaline rush. There's an aggression that feels good. It feels like you're powerful when you're angry and you do have an adrenaline dump. Well, you get that same feeling when you put on armor and you take a shot and you realize that didn't hurt and I'm about to go back out.
Yeah.
You get that same aggression, you get that same feeling, that same adrenaline rush. That is the positive side of an addiction to endorphins that completely got rid of me ever wanting to be angry. I don't even want to be angry anymore. I just want to go out on the field and fight with my friends or whoever wants to come out there. So it's really good for me to hear what y'all said about that too. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm one of the happiest people you will ever meet. I love life. When I had my surgery, the doctor came in and said, "This has literally saved your life." I'm like, "Well, duh." He's like, "No, really, your liver is 3 times as big as it should have been, and you would have been dead. You would have needed a liver transplant in 2 years, and at 450 pounds, you would have never qualified to even be considered to be put on the list. So you would have died. You need to remember that." And so at that point in time, I chose that the rest of my life I would celebrate. This is the way I celebrate, and it gives me that release. I will admit that there have been times that I've woohooed on the field, but it gives me that power of having control over my life and having a control over everything that I never had control over growing up, and that I can win, and that there's a way that no matter what, you get to control your life, and you can choose to live happily, even with anger issues. You can still be the happiest person in the world. So.
And have self-worth.
Yes.
So, that is all the time we have for this panel. We only have 30 minutes in this one, so.
We can probably sneak some time in for questions.
Questions? You guys
Yes.
have questions?
So,
Yeah.
if anybody has any questions.
Oh, no.
I'm curious how much does gear cost to be able to do?
To like get in.
Yeah.
So with HEMA, it's a little flexible because you can kind of get in and start learning without needing the whole gear.
Okay.
My gear is actually up on that stand right there. That's what I use in a tournament.
Yeah.
It's really not that bad. I mean, I have wrestling shoes and like legging, like sports pants, and yeah, that's mostly it. But it can still, like, all of that together, I bought in pieces, and it's probably $600 is in there for like a tournament set. That's not like the high end. It's not probably the low end either. But like, so just getting in though, all you need is really a helmet and gloves. So even just getting some lacrosse gloves and like a fencing helmet is all you really need to start. Obviously you don't want to get in like really into fighting, but in terms of like really like slow bouts and things like that, that's really all you need.
Okay. Where are the clubs here?
Are you in Atlanta? Yeah. There's actually a really good HEMA group in Atlanta, the Atlanta
Trifecta.
Yep, they're a fantastic group, led by Keith, and he's actually going to be around. Tomorrow we have several tournament things going on, so if you also want to see it in action, there will be a HEMA one at 1 o'clock, so if you want to see Longsword, Keith will also be there.
And I think there's actually, isn't there a soft kit tournament?
Yeah,
Like
two
with
games.
bopper swords and stuff. So if you guys kind of want to try it, you can. If you guys want to come up at any time
list
It was actually pre-register, and it's closed. There may be a couple people who drop. So if you're really hopeful, maybe there'll be somebody who's not there. You can take their place.
And all of us really like to get you hooked. So, you know, want to come over after this thing and want to try on our gear or whatever.
Yeah, we'll
we're more
hit you
than
in the
happy.
head.
We're more than happy to let you feel
Love
that
to
out.
hit you in the
kind of
head.
thing.
Yeah. Alright.
I guess everyone can answer this one individually. It kind of pertains to each one of you, but like, if you could, it could either be yourself or somebody else, but if you could look back at somebody who was in the situation you were in, what would be one thing that you would tell them to do? Like one action that they could take or one thing that they could go out and just go for?
Ask for help. Like, I mean, sometimes that's not always possible, I understand, but I wish that I had asked an adult that if what was going on in my house was normal, because I just took it as normal. And I spent a lot of time being scared and angry and just not realizing that there were other adults out there that could function a little bit better than my family. So just maybe asking another adult if this is normal and not being ashamed of your family. I'm still not ashamed of my family. They made me who I am, and I love them very much. And so, yeah, don't let that shame keep you from asking other people.
Like for me, it's don't be scared. I don't do regret, and I've been through a lot. It's who I am. It's what made me who I am. Wouldn't change that because I would be too afraid that it would change the person that I became, and I really love the person that I became. And so everybody has horrible things that have happened to them in the past. Let it stay in the past. Look forward and figure out how you're going to make your future better. And quit worrying about the past. Just let it go.
I think finding good people to be around is super important. So, like for me, finding like Gorilla Josh was like, I know, I keep talking about how he like beat me down. I was like, it was the best thing. But he was like the guy who afterward we go out for beers and get chicken wings and different things, and he would be all like, "You're my friend." Like it was just so happy. He was a happy guy, and like so just being around like good people, and I mean that's huge difference. So.
I would say understand that you're not defined by how you feel. You're defined by what you do. And you can feel happy and you do bad things and that makes you bad. You can feel angry but do good things and that makes you good. You can feel upset, you can feel all sorts of things, but it matters most what you do. It's okay to feel all those things. It's okay to feel angry, but do something good with that. Your actions are more important than your feelings. That doesn't make your feelings invalid, but you get control over your actions, even if you don't sometimes have control over your feelings. That's
Any other questions?
Not so much a question, but more a statement for you, actually. I might get a little weepy too, so if I do forget
That's okay, we'll come together.
we'll just do it together. If you can take any offer for anything you can do, coaching or writing or announcing, I really pray you'll take it. I was 2 years old when I decided I was going to be a martial artist. It's pretty much been my life. I've lived and breathed it. I've never been more alive than when I'm on the training floor. I don't care what I'm doing. I don't care if I'm teaching. I don't care if I'm beating up a heavy bag. Whatever. It's just, It's what makes me feel. About 6 years ago, I was diagnosed with a Chiari malformation. And as a result, I can't be thrown, I can't do forward rolls, break falls, anything. No cage fighting, because one full shot to the head, lights out. So that minimized my training. Then this year, I'm diagnosed with degenerative disc disease, osteoarthritis, and slipped discs. All because of my decades of training. So I can no longer just do period. But I have written a book that I'm currently getting published on helping people with finding the right instructor, the right school, avoiding contract traps, tips on practicing and sparring in their free time, things like that. My bishop has actually helped me with being able to teach self-defense classes at church to our young women's group and is currently working with me on getting a self-defense class that we can teach to the whole church on Wednesday nights. There's always a way that you can still be able to stay in what you love and still feel just as alive. So please, just do not lose that. Find a way that you can still be able to keep in that, because you will still get that feeling.
Believe me,
She's
I
not
will.
going anywhere.
No.
Yeah.
In fact,
Do not let
next year
yourself
I'll
get talked
actually
out of
be
that.
doing my first TEDx talk. So
Nice.
we'll see what happens. So.
Nice.
Sweet.
But I won't give up. I promise.
That sounds good.
Yes.
Mine's a little bit lighter than the other questions. All right, for the H&B guys, I mean, if you're in armor, I guess you can answer it too. But what would your dream harness be, or kit?
Ooh.
I'm in my dream harness.
Okay.
Yeah,
It's a
she's
titanium
in my
Mongol.
dream harness.
Yeah, I can't do Western European. I feel like because I'm contrary to popular rule, I'm actually claustrophobic. And when you see me put my helmet on before bout, it's not because I'm just preparing early. It's that I'm talking myself off the ledge. Because I'm like, every time I put my helmet on, I'm like, okay, just breathe. You're not gonna die. You're not gonna die. You're not gonna die.
You've been hit in the face before. It's okay.
You're
we
fine,
survived.
you're fine. And I also have asthma, so if I get too wound up, I have panic attacks because my asthma attack will send me into a panic attack, which sends me into a more asthma attack. It's a horrible, horrible domino effect. But it's the being in a tin man, which is what I call Western European, terrifies me. But Mongol, I can do yoga in Mongol. It's just like, now this morning I tried some new elbow pads, which I'm like, well, that's not gonna work. So I'm like hitting Kristina like this. Oh! My husband's like, what is wrong with you? Or have you like suddenly lost your feeling in your hands? Yes, actually I have. So, you know, you test out things, but that's my dream kit.
Okay.
Very similar to what I have now, 14th century European, but I want to have made everything from the like Under Armour out. Like I'm 75% there. I haven't made my legs. I did make my body armor. My next set of body armor, I'll make myself. Made my helmet, made all the other stuff. So I take a lot of pride in the armor I wear that I made it myself. I don't want to have a full suit of that.
Captain Phasma.
Oh my God! If I can, okay, I take my answer back. If I could fight in Captain Phasma's armor, I totally would. Or
Wouldn't that be so cool? Oh man.
Were you gonna say or Brienne?
Or Brienne. But,
Sure, hers is
but
pretty
then I'm
cool
like,
too,
no,
but-
hers is a little too constraining.
It's, I mean, but yeah, bad. I mean,
Yeah, it's awesome. I would gladly spend any amount of money I can on professional armors because I'm like, I don't trust myself with a hammer. No. Yeah, I can sew everything. Making armor, no. Never gonna trust that.
Like 1 or 2 more questions?
Yeah, depending on how long it goes.
They haven't opened the door and
Oh, they
kicked us
haven't.
out
Oh,
yet.
okay. So yeah.
Yeah, hey. Any other questions? Before we're like, we'll go on forever.
And in case y'all know, I love to talk. So.
And if you have any questions, but you don't want to ask in front of the whole room,
Feel
so
free.
let's talk about after it's over. Just come up to one of us because we got time before our next panel. Actually, our next panel tonight is the Armor Fashion Show
Yeah.
at 7 o'clock
We're in our armor and showing
upstairs in the International Ballroom. It's an awesome chance to take a look at some awesome stuff going on, and then we've got the tournaments tomorrow. But if it's okay with Kristen, we'll stay around afterward and answer questions.
Yeah, or you can grab one of my cards if you have questions for me or whatever. I'm more than happy to answer anything. Yes.
Where's the tournament tomorrow?
Sheraton
Sheraton
Grand
Grand Ballroom.
Yeah.
I have no idea.
So it's like
And it's a cage fight.
There's
So
schedules.
it's really freaking awesome.
This emblem, the Palmetto Knights emblem, there's schedules over there that have maps and times and everything. So make sure you go.
Thanks, pretty useful. Alright. Well, thank you all for coming. We'll go open up the doors and you can escape and run.
Or tackle us, whatever you want. There you go.